Great. Okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and just kick off. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm really grateful to everybody's participation in this meeting and in giving feedback on this very, very important project at the Burger King corner, sort of the entryway to our downtown from the north side, from our first ward. So this is just a really, really important corner for us all. So thank you all for being here this evening. This means a lot to me. I'm Claire Kelly, First Ward Alderman. I guess that's about it. I'll hand it off to you, Johanna. And thank you, Johanna. I just want to also thank Johanna. She really, thank you for all the work you put in to help get this set up. I really appreciate it. All the hours you put in to help arrange for these community meetings that I asked for. So thank you so much.
Happy to help. Good evening, everybody. I am Johanna Neiden. I'm the City of Evanston's Community Development Director. I'm joined tonight by my colleagues, Melissa Klotz, who's the City Zoning Administrator, and Katie Ashbaugh, who is a city planner. So we're here as city staff to the meeting. I'll let the developer of the proposed site introduce himself and his team in a few minutes. But this is a key corner in our downtown. So we're excited for feedback from this group. At this point, this is very preliminary. Nobody has submitted any plan development application. This would be a plan development. The team is really looking forward to hearing feedback from the community before we start the official process that would go to Design and Project Review Committee, which is the staff committee that reviews these projects, and then to the Plan Commission, and then on to City Council for review. If you have questions, we'll wait for questions until the end of the presentation just to keep it flowing. You can submit questions in the chat, or we'll also you can raise your hand and we'll try to answer in the order in which we see the hands come up. So I will introduce Johnny Carlson and his team.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Kelly, Johanna. Appreciate your time. I am joined by Morgan Bear Blaska. The both of us work at Trammell Crow Company. We're a developer here based in Chicago. We cover the Midwest out of Chicago, and we're excited to be in front of you tonight because we're talking about our second project, prospective project in Evanston. We delivered Avador Evanston, 169 unit age restricted apartment project about 12 months ago, and are excited to be back in front of the community tonight to talk about a different project at the Burger King site like we mentioned. Before we jump into a slide presentation, I want to introduce our architect who also worked on that project at Avador Evanston, which is ESG Architects. Both Matt Blewett and Matt Axman are on the phone from ESG Architects, and our team has really worked closely over the past few years on all product types throughout the Midwest, and we're fortunate to have them on another project here that we're going to present tonight. So I think what we want to do is, one, stress the fact that this is early, like Johanna said. We like to reach out to the community in every project we do. We don't cookie cutter projects, stamp them out in various communities with the same design, the same goals, the same aesthetics. We really, really try to listen to the community, find the right site for the right product, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to talk a little bit about the project and then hand it over to ESG. I'll go to full screen mode here. So the subject site is 1740 Orrington Ave. We hit on that briefly, but the project to the left of the screen is our Avador project located in Evanston. The middle of the building is an image of 1375 Fulton, which is another life science office research project in downtown Chicago. And then the one just to the right of that is also a 420,000 square foot office building for research. Similar product types that we're here to talk about. That's why those two images are on the screen, in addition to Avador Evanston. Trammell Crow Company was 1948 was founded in Dallas. Out of Dallas, we have 17 business units located throughout the country. We've, over the past few decades, built about 2,800 projects totaling about 15 billion currently in process. So that's not over the history, that's the current projects we have. So not to put up a bunch of stats, but the reason we like that stat is because we cover all the markets, all the product types. We look at forward-looking trends, what's going on in the hot markets across the country, how do we follow those trends and really follow not just a local perspective, but a national perspective. Over the last 5 years, we're the most active developer rated by Commercial Property News, and aggregate value over the history, about $70 billion of construction. So just showing that we're an active developer and we look to unique projects throughout the country. Contextually, we wanted to set the where we are within your community because it's important to all of us. This is 1740 Orrington Avenue, and I'll zoom in here, but the Burger King site's outlined in addition to the housing complex that's just south of it, adjacent to the alley. As you zoom in, the boundary is in red. As you have Clark Street to the north running east to west, and then Orrington kind of running diagonally in the north-south direction. We're just here at about 21,000 square feet, including the residential building, the parking, and then the Burger King that's been closed and vacated. Looking southwest, this is a bird's eye perspective just to give you some more context of how important this corner is. We view this as the entrance from the university to Evanston and vice versa, and the hard corner that really is going to set the stage of what goes on throughout these blocks and really trying to tie into the existing neighborhood, the context, and as we go. This is the building that we're here to talk about. This is broken up in many different arrangements. You see a portion that's here on the taller portion, a lower portion, and then a podium that Matt will discuss here from a perspective. This is Clark Street bending around the corner, Orrington. This is the hard corner that I believe that we wanted to get some ideas from you at the community of what to utilize that space for. It's flexible, it's retail, it's community space. We really wanted to bring that up as a topic of discussion when Councilmember Kelly and I discussed high level of what we wanted to present to you tonight a few weeks ago. As we were getting this presentation, we wanted to make sure that's on the agenda of reaching out to the community and making sure we hit on that. The other piece of this is trying to create a streetscape that will evolve over time. Obviously, you have the hotel here, you have an alley, but a lot of this development here, we're trying to tie into the existing neighborhood and not just what's here today, what's here in 10 years and what's here in 100 years. So this main point is the office entry on the north side of the building. Retail spans the hard corner, and then active space all the way to the alley with bike fitness. So making sure glass and pedestrian realm is really identified as we go. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to ESG to give you a brief overview, more aesthetic, more design versus high level capacity. So thank you again, and we'll be here for questions at the end.
Yeah. And thanks, Johnny, and thanks to everybody who stuck around with us here this evening. We're super excited to present this project, such an important site as both the community and Johnny's pointed out for Evanston, and we're very interested in working with such a gateway position in the city. As Johnny mentioned, we're talking about 10 stories of mixed-use space over one level of below-grade parking. The first level was described, and then 2 through 9 house office and state-of-the-art laboratory space, life science targeted. And the 10th floor is an amenity floor that walks out onto a 10th floor roof terrace with an 11th floor mechanical space above. Johnny, I think we can flip to the next slide and talk through kind of the design. So the building's contemporary design expression is intended to complement the state-of-the-art laboratories that will be housed within. Its floor-to-ceiling glass will provide natural light and views for the occupants and maximum planning flexibility for future adaptability, which is very important in that sector. What you're seeing here is a building clad in warm tone materials that are inspired by the natural beauty of the North Shore. It's stone, it's water, it's wood, and intended to integrate well with the surrounding urban context, which we can see a little bit in those aerial perspectives we saw before. Although the building's situated on a small site, its bulk is reduced by separating it into two distinct masses that rise above the podium level. The eastern portion set back from Orrington, as you can see there, is shorter, expected to align a little better with the existing Hilton Orrington Hotel. And the western portion rises a little taller, and like I said, houses the amenity space and then the mechanical floor and rooftop mechanical equipment, which would be screened from view from the pedestrian level. Here you see a view from the north side, highlighting again those two kind of distinct massings as they rise above the podium level, and showing that shorter area at the roof terrace on level 10. Go to the next slide. And then here we see from the northwest perspective, what we're seeing here, the gray portion is the structural core, elevator core, and those windows in the middle would be elevator lobby windows, giving the occupants a view towards the west. The western facade is intended to be a warm tone, maybe metal panel that has a distinct kind of dimensional articulation to give it some variation and just kind of visual interest on that facade. Here's a closer up view from that same vantage. So you can see our entry lobby is double height space and a double height canopy kind of presenting the main office entry. We'll move to the next one here. We'll get kind of a broad view of the north elevation, highlighting kind of the wood look material that we expect or are inspired to use to give a warm or tactile experience to the pedestrian level. So on the right, you're seeing the double height entry to the office, and then to the left, you start to see those retail active use spaces and those portals that are recessed entries to those areas. As we move around the building to the west, we see the kind of key corner as a rounded eased corner to kind of soften the experience at Clark and Orrington. And again, you see the wood look material, and then the setback here, I think this image articulates the relationship to the Orrington Hilton the best. Above the second floor, we're set back further than the hotel, and trying to not be as kind of dominant on that Orrington elevation. And then here is a view up Orrington north towards the university, highlighting here the undulating of the facade on the Orrington facade, with those kind of slab edge extensions as they peek out and give some visual interest, almost like a wave or stacked stone. And also highlighting kind of the material, the warm tone materials intended to integrate well with the limestone facades on the Northwestern campus. And this last slide we're going to show is just to kind of make a comparison with the surrounding context in terms of height. Our building stands at around 150 feet tall in this current configuration, adjacent to the Orrington Hilton, around 106 to its mansard, and then up to 135 to the peak of the cupola. We can see some of the other surrounding buildings just as you go a little west. You start to see some taller buildings in the urban core, and then further south, even taller into the more downtown core. And then we can see as a relationship to Northwestern and to some of the residential buildings to our east and north.
And I wanted to, we hit on this. I wanted to end with this because I think it's going to be a topic that we'll discuss, but I wanted to hit on the type of office space that we are building, not only in Chicagoland, but across the country, with a big, robust demand of research, innovation. And we're homers. We obviously want Illinois to win on this research and innovation. If you look at campuses, cities around the country, like MIT or other areas in Boston or South San Francisco or San Diego, those are the areas that are winning. If you look at keeping jobs local, spinning out of the universities, meaning if they're working at the university, they're a PhD, or they're in other research, innovation, technology, there is very little lab and office research space for high technology, high innovation in and around Chicagoland. So we are the only developer that's actually in the ground and leasing up and delivering this space currently. And we're having success in meeting the needs of the users. And you have to build a different building than just standard office building. It has to have more power, different clear heights, more air in and out, flexible uses. And all those are baked into this design that you see in front of you. And we view that the companies that have been coming out of Northwestern, leaving to go outside of Illinois to the coast, we want to keep those companies here locally, create jobs. We think that this is the site, if you were to do a research innovation office building for those high technology uses, where it should be in Evanston in our minds. So that's why I wanted to hit on that, because it is unique. It's not like any other building in and around Evanston. And we think it fits in really, really well. And I think it'll be a success. So with that, I'll hand it back to the group and unshare so I can see your faces. We can obviously flip back and forth to the deck as needed. But thanks again for your time this evening.
So feel free to put a question in the chat or raise your hand, and then we'll call upon you. How about we start with, I don't know your name, but 841944.
Hi, I'm Arthur Altman. I live in the residence of Sherman Plaza. Thanks for your presentation. Couple of little things I don't know if you're aware of. There was a building going to be going on Davis near Chicago. Then there was a building that was proposed on Chicago, right near the Marion. And one of the big defects of all the buildings that have been proposed is not enough parking place. 35 parking places for your building is totally inadequate. There's a city garage nearby, usually filled, and there's totally nowhere around the street for cars to park. So if you do build your building, you should have at least 100 places. I know we're near the public transportation, but not everybody takes it. Not everybody who's going to be doing research is going to want to take their bicycle. So that's the first thing. Second, the elevation doesn't bother me. It's 10 stories. That's good that you don't want to put up a 20 or 30-story building. But I think you guys are being very optimistic about the need for office space. I like the idea of research that would possibly go in. There's a Prudential building that's totally been gutted on, let's see, Sherman and Orrington on Davis. They've totally gutted it, and it's totally empty right now. I don't know if they have tenants. The 909 Davis Street has had a couple of floors of empty space for a couple of years. The big Chase building, I know, has empty space. So I appreciate your optimism, guys, but I don't know if there is need for another office building, maybe in 2, 3, 4, 5 years when all this monkey business goes away.
That's a great comment and a question that we anticipated. So I'll just explain a little bit more on the research front.
Sure.
So this building is not for typical office. This building is for needs that you can't just build out in any various office around the community. So it's a high level of technology that's baked into the base building standards and allows for these tenants to do science and research that you can't do anywhere else. So I just want to be clear on that there's no competition. All the buildings in and around Evanston are at capacity that either university is part of or any research facility. Those are all at capacity. So any innovation that comes out of the university wants to go out, and they typically have to go out elsewhere because there is no space. So we've done our own research on that. I think it's a great question, but we're not at all worried. If anything, we need to get this building in the ground sooner than later to satisfy the demand that's leaving between now and the next 20 months that it would take to build the building. The parking comment, I think, is adequate. I think it's reasonable. I would tell you that research office demand is less dense. So there's less groups there all at one time that come in various points throughout the day. The evening, they're doing research experiments, and they are also walking to and from university facilities because a lot of these groups have startup companies outside. They might work at the university, but they're doing research for things on their own. They're starting their own companies. So we do think there's going to be some cohabitation among the startup companies that want to stay in Evanston versus do their outside work off campus in a different city across the country. I think the other piece is we want to be a steward of the parking garages that the city owns, and we are going to work with staff to work on an agreement that as we lease up, we will be required to lease stalls and an adjacent ramp. I believe, Johanna, you've done some analysis, Melissa, that those ramps, there's plenty of stalls to park in. So let's park in the stalls that are available versus drive more traffic to an ingress egress point to cause more traffic in and around the site on such a key corner. Let's try to have forward thinking views on utilizing the ramps that are there, an easy walk, park below grade. We're spending the money to actually go down one level to park the 35 stalls versus build it on grade to build a taller building. And we're doing that at our expense. But I think you categorize those 3 buckets of parking, and we think that combination of 35 on site, because you do need some for just marketability and financeability, utilizing the city garage is paying to the city, and then also the biking and the transit, we think we're totally covered.
Okay, 2 questions. I have 2 more points. Have you contacted Northwestern to see how they would feel about this and the need for research office space? And the other is, if you needed to, could you go down 2 stories for the parking instead of 1? I know we're right near the lake.
It's right at the water table. So I'll hit the easy one. The water table is right there. So we're maximizing the depth there. And also it's very expensive, obviously, with sheet piling to not have any adjacent structures have any issues as we go down. So we're doing it in a safe condition. We're doing it in a condition that we're not building into the water table on the parking perspective. And we are early. We don't really go out and market buildings until we meet with the community and discuss what we're going to build and get this thing improved. And then we start marketing it, because there's a gestation period of constructability that takes 18 to 20 months. That's plenty of time to lease up. I will tell you that we feel very confident, given the activity we have downtown and across the country on research, the amount of venture capital, amount of money flowing into this industry. There's very little space in and around the country. And if you look at an MIT or Boston or Cambridge in those markets, you look to South San Francisco, any of the big university towns, they have tens of millions of this space. And all of Chicagoland is 1.3 million square feet in all the suburbs, downtown, including in and around Evanston. So it's a blip on the radar, and this is 150,000 square feet that we feel very, very confident that there's a need for.
Okay. One last point, and I'll let other people speak. I like the rounded part that you have. That architecturally appeals to me. The other part seems I like your use of materials, but seems very ordinary. There's a new apartment building built on Sherman, a couple of blocks south of Davis, and it curved in and out, and the balconies were not one in line. Maybe you guys might want to think of something more creative facing west.
Yeah, I think the west side, that's a great comment. I think you're talking about the Albion project.
Yeah.
And we think that's a great looking project. And I think that's great feedback. We'll try to implement that. The west side of the building is the elevator core, and office buildings need adequate floor plate to have bait ups to do science and layouts for laboratory work and office work. So what we were constrained on is the west elevation needs to be appended to the west side. We can get more creative as we bend around the corner to the north and to the southeast, and make sure that we address that. That's good critique.
Good. Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
So I just want to go on to the next. So with regard to the studies that you said you did regarding the need for this office space, if you could share them with me, that would be great, just because this has come up many times. And if I had those and I could reference those studies, that would be really helpful in terms of talking to constituents. And then, yeah, I also had concerns about that west exposure, driving in the flat. I wish it could be up against the Orrington, the elevator shafts, if it could be, as opposed to driving in, coming and seeing that side would be nice. But I will, let's see, Linda Dilbosk.
Thank you. Alderman Kelly, can I ask you a question regarding this? Was this already proposed and passed by the city? Has this been proposed or passed by the city, or have been? No, this is just the beginning conversation.
Yeah, Linda, this is very early. I've asked that we hold these meetings before, final zoning analysis go through, or So
okay,
great. This meeting is so that we can give feedback, so that we can get this right.
Okay, great. Because I didn't know where this was exactly, if you had just was grandfathered in your position or what. The second thing is, the gentleman who spoke prior to me mentioned a building 615 Davis. That is another building, a professional workspace. Johanna, is that building still being built, or are they on stop with that?
They've been approved. My understanding is they're continuing to work in the leasing environment. But that building is very different than this building.
I understand that. I get that the difference. This is a more of a technology building, tech science type building, versus that is maybe like professional building where people would go rent offices, things to that nature. And so the reason why I was asking is because I know the Chandler building at one point was a technology building. And I know those spaces are empty. I know that the Orrington took over some technology as well, then they're no longer doing it. So I understand the need especially through COVID, how technology has really advanced in science and whatnot. But where is Northwestern? You had mentioned, is Northwestern students, you had kind of mentioned, I guess it was Johnny, you had mentioned something like Northwestern students would be using this building, or a lot
And
of
I should clarify,
startup
this is
companies?
not a Northwestern building. I don't want that to be misconstrued at all. This is not. This is a private development off campus, not partied to their research district. I mentioned the faculty and students and all the interesting things they're researching on university or after they graduate. We want those jobs when they formulate companies, start researching certain things, AI, therapies, and other, to keep those jobs in Evanston. That's what this building would be for when those individuals graduate out, move on, or are working in and around the university. Adjunct professors, they can do their science here and start companies here off campus, not on campus.
So your thought about moving into this space was to build an area, a tech building, to provide the demand of people leaving or finishing up their studies there at Northwestern, as well as inviting other small startups to have a place there to resident, correct?
It's for anyone who comes that has science that we can do. We're not,
because we have a research building here at Northwestern as well. I didn't know if you knew that.
Yes, we know that very well, and this is outside of that, and we're going to have other occupants outside of Northwestern that want to be in and around Evanston.
I think it's very innovative to have this here. The only thing is, again, is the parking, and that's something that we really need to look at. I understand, because the Orrington building where the Chase Bank is, they don't house a lot of cars currently right now, because of they're probably, I think, 80% leased right now, maybe. I'll circle back with them to get a new number, but we just don't want another building going up. I know and I know many community members I've spoken with, another building going up with a grand idea than it going empty, right? Because if you kind of just walk through Evanston, you will see that. And so that's just my concern. I'm just expressing it. I'm just one of 55,000 people who live here. But my other concern is, Johanna, in the meeting for 615 developer, are you going to ask this particular company to donate $50,000 to the downtown Evanston as well? Or is that just for 615 developer only?
So that project, one of their public benefits was to provide assistance to downtown Evanston. That was a public benefit that the council approved. This developer has not provided any proposed public benefits. This is still totally concept. They're looking for feedback on the physical space and how that's designed, and not necessarily other things. So I do want to make sure there's a couple people who have their hands. Maybe one last question, Linda, and then we can go to the chat as well.
Johanna, I'm going to finish up. Okay. Thank you. Moving on. I think this is again a great building. I think it's very innovative. I do believe that Councilman Kelly had a great opinion about this, the West Tower being tied up with the hotel. But if you can share the research, the numbers with Alderman Kelly, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it was Mary, and then Bruce, and then Deborah is what I saw, Johanna. If that's
Trisha Connolly put a comment in the chat. I don't know if I made you a co-host. She put it in right at the beginning. How do we know there will be a need for life science? What if there isn't? How is this space flexible? And are you getting additional tax credits for providing a building like this?
We are, this is a 100% private development, all in with the tax credit. There's no public subsidy here. So just to be clear on that, we're not asking for anything from the city on that perspective. When we build these buildings, as you can imagine, we do our own research, and we're raising money to build these with equity and debt partners, and they're across the country too. So we all feel that there is a demand, and obviously we won't break ground unless there is, because it's a big risk for all of us, and we take it very, very seriously to our stakeholders. So we do think there's demand. We are leasing up our building in downtown Chicago right now for this. We're the only building that has Class A new construction laboratory and life science space, and we're seeing demand even during COVID and coming out of COVID here. So we feel very, very strong that we have a finger on the pulse of where demand is, where is it going, and we think that Evanston's right in line where there is a need for a cluster in Evanston in addition to downtown. So I do want to point that out, that we view Illinois as a cluster, and the life science realm is about 1.3 million of laboratory space, and it's full. So obviously the new buildings that just delivered are in lease up, but we do feel that there is plenty of demand, and we do feel like we have a finger on the pulse with the current demand.
Great. And let's see, then Mary Rosinski. And again, if you could, again, just to, so I can, it always helps to provide, to respond from a point of evidence-based responses. So any studies you can provide me regarding the need for this space would be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I've missed the very beginning, so I'm not sure how many offices they are, but in your other places, who is renting?
I don't think they said how many offices.
Yeah, it's speculative. So there's not a tenant identified right now. So every floor is about 18,000 square feet, which will house, depending on how much office and research is on a floor, it's going to be variable. So it's the 10 stories of office. It's not 100% office because you have the ground level, you have two, and then the second through 10 is office. So it's basically 9 levels of with including amenity spot on the rooftop. So
About 150,000 square feet
150 in total.
in lab.
So you're going to do like a build out for people as they.
We customize the build out for the science and the office and technology that they need.
Okay, and so to that point, on your other buildings, is there anyone that's completely rented out now at this point? And do you have an idea of how much per square foot, like someone coming in that needed, like how much space does the average person in your other?
Yeah, I'll just tell you, there is a premium over office because the build out, it could be double, right? So there is an increase in that, but it's very tough to put a finger on exactly the premium because it depends on the lease term, the credit, the science. A lot of them are chemistry based, some are biology based. Chemistry have more fume hoods, biology doesn't. Electrical needs might be higher. So it really, really depends on the science, the need. But I would tell you there is a premium beyond office. And that's why you don't see a lot of the office buildings just getting converted, because it's just, you can't financially do it. And the building doesn't allow you in the bones of the existing conditions to do so.
Thank you. I only have 2 more questions and I'll let go. So is your experience in this model, which is kind of interesting, that people are coming and going at different hours, like maybe 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, but also at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock night. Do you see this as something that can support additionally? Because ideally, like I would love to see residences on that lot too. But this is kind of an interesting forward-thinking concept, as if it doesn't close down and go dark at 5 o'clock and create a whole net.
Yeah, no, we agree. These are innovation hubs that science doesn't stop. And these experiments go in, and those fume hoods and biosafety cabinets are doing research, and they can't be left alone at evening hours. And a lot of scientists will, have a daytime job or be a PhD student doing research, and they're there after classes or in and around different time periods. So that's also why we want to implement such a unique hard corner of that community space, because we want that to feel like it's the heart of Evanston, and it's right there with the university, and it has to work for everybody. So it's not to be in like a financial district in the downtown Chicago where you go to a Starbucks and they're closed at 8 p.m. because go to the one down the street where all the residential is. That's not our intent. I also think that in this day and age with, we do residential projects too in and around Evanston, the city, and across the country. Right now, if you look at the supply and demand of housing, there's plenty of it from high-end luxury. So we want to take a different angle on delivering something that's not in the market, pays taxes, doesn't ask for subsidy from the city, and creates jobs that are going to compete with other areas of the country. So that was really our thesis, and we can get this building up and going the minute we get support from the community and yourselves on this Zoom call a lot faster than trying to make a thesis saying let's build more apartments in a market we're in right now.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly, I think you were on mute there.
Thank you, Ms. Rosinski. Mr. Ennenbach.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of material questions. Back to the west elevation. Given that you've got the elevator core there, a couple of stairwells going down and some other things. There are not going to be a lot of windows on that west elevation. and then you listed, you expressed that there was some, I think you said there was going to be some kind of metal panel there. Could you kind of explain what that is? It looks like
This beige material and we can, this is exactly what I wanted. We also are thinking as this, there's certain areas to work on some art, there's materiality, there's ins and outs, but I believe Matt Blewett, you explained the brown,
Right. And
more metal, and this is more.
Right. We're very early stages. So obviously we want to hear input from the city and everyone else. But what we've envisioned so far is that the beigey kind of material would be kind of a natural toned, potentially metal type cladding with some dimensions. That's why you're seeing kind of ins and outs, variegated design to give it some relief. The gray material would not be necessarily the raw concrete of the structure. It would likely be a cladding. So whether it's concrete or cement board type cladding panel, we're showing some texture on that. And then to round out what you're seeing here is a kind of a zinc tone metal strip at the podium, and then the wood look material that we described before in the actual portal of the entry.
Is this the zinc that I want to make sure?
Yeah, it's a kind of a zinc tone. It's kind of intended to be the color of kind of a natural zinc to stay in that kind of natural material kind of inspiration that we've had for this building.
And then this is the wood kind of
wood look type material. So it's kind of closer to grade so people can experience the graining or the texture of that more and give a warm kind of entry to the building.
What was the other question I had? You referred to wood look. I'm not sure what that means. Is that a metal panel?
I'll tell you, I'll maybe spin to the front. I mean, this is the underside of all these balconies in our market project is a wood tone. It's not wood itself. It's a cladding material that architects can speak to more. And then
and to your question, the wood look is in a type 1 building like this, it's challenging to use actual wood material. So often we try to use the best wood look materials to bring that warmth. Some of them are actually composite materials with a real wood veneer on the outside. Those can be used in this type of building. Some of the other ones we've used, like on the middle image there, that's a metal panel that's kind of about a 6-inch plank that does resemble wood. So there's a lot of options out there. That's the only reason, not trying to be coy with that language. It's just with a building, type 1 building, it's challenging to use combustible materials on the exterior.
Does it have like a wood grain? Could you say
many of them can and do.
Okay.
There's a lot of options. There's actually a lot of those type of materials on the market.
Okay, I know it's early in the stage, but I was curious. Thank you very much.
And something to maybe note on that western facade as well. So what some of the things that we're doing in order to introduce additional kind of ribbons of vertical glass are we're punching into the elevator core itself, so that as you enter the elevator lobby, you're getting that strip of glass while you're in that experience, and we're punching into that core as much as possible to get those vertical ribbons to introduce as much glazing as we can on that facade.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you.
Deborah Jetzer? Unless you want me to read your questions.
I can read them. Thanks, Claire. I have 2 general questions in 2 different areas. The first one has to do with tax status. And I was wondering if the developer would agree to not sell this building to Northwestern or any other tax exempt entity, so that it would in perpetuity maintain its tax base for the city of Evanston.
I would tell you that we can work with staff to get them comfortable that, but there is a level of financeability of saying you can't sell to someone in the future. It's not the plan. This is a spec building. Trust me, if this thing were taken by them or they wanted it, they'd already have it before, going at risk for trying to fill the whole thing with no securitization of who's taking the floors. So I don't want you to think that. I just, at some point, to finance a building, you can't say you can't sell to certain people into perpetuity. But I do know that buildings that are multi-tenanted have to pay taxes. There's no, if someone leases space, and that's going to be on the tax roll.
If, and again, just an extension of this question, if Northwestern were to be the occupant mainly filling these labs that you're building, would, have you had been part of any discussions or know of any rumblings that they would intend or be interested in buying this building a year out or?
No, we're not. And we don't start our marketing process until we have a project that we can actually say we're approved and we're ready to go. And there's been no discussions about buying our building. Obviously, they're a big stakeholder of the community, and they're well aware that we have this site under contract because it's been in Evanston now. So we're also in discussions with users that call us every day and say, hey, do you have any lab space in Chicagoland? And we say, yes, we have it in Fulton Market, and we're looking at other areas. So I will tell you that that's the conversations we've had. And then I don't want everyone to think that this is getting sold to Northwestern. That's not our intent. It's not our thesis. We actually think what curates ecosystem is when there's multi-tenant buildings in and around staging these companies that they can feed off each other. They can do programming. They can use the community space. They can have leaders flying from across the country to host seminars and stay at the Orrington and eat dinner at all the various restaurants in and around Evanston. That's what is an ecosystem and gives back to the community. And, just doing a big lease with one tenant, they don't necessarily get the overlap and the cluster that we are looking at to create. And we hope that there's demand here where this fills, and we're talking in front of you in 2 years when this is a success.
Okay, and my last question is around residential versus office. Have you at any point, or did you at any point consider building residential instead so that you could create some affordable housing for Evanston versus the proposed 100% market rate office building?
Yeah, we did look. We're always looking for housing. I'll tell you the truth. Our thesis right now, where real estate taxes are, construction costs, and supply and demand characteristics in and around Chicagoland, including Evanston, we view that that's a big bet that's tough to come to the table and make work. So what we did is we've been sought out to look for the right site to do this thesis because we think it's the right thesis. And when we were able to secure this site under contract, we obviously just looked at it for life science office because we've been looking for the right site to do this at. So I will tell you, we're open to finding ways to public benefit this project. It's a planned development. It's exactly what we wanted to hear of what's important to the community. If there's some program that we can participate in, if it's the community space, if it's anything else that I really want ideas to try to tackle the community, what they want.
Well, like it's done for residential, have you considered or would you consider setting a percentage of the building aside for just small business and not say that there is an interest in the science labs in large part from Northwestern, a big university, to not squeeze out maybe the smaller researchers who are not affiliated with Northwestern, who have startup companies, like you said.
We're not against, actually, that's what makes these buildings work. So we also will build out a floor depending on the size and the demand and what it looks like as you build these. But we're going to look at floors that are flexible, that have shorter lease terms to be able to offer that to some of those growth stage companies. And that's part of, you have floors that are half floor users. So there may be graduating floors that we call grad suites. And then there's the full floor users that are mature companies. So we need space for everybody. And I think that ground level could also be an area to look at trying to, more affordable meeting space, gathering space, food and beverage space that is not just during the business hours.
Well, that would lead me to my last question here, and then I'll let someone else ask. And this was mentioned a little bit. My concern, I live downtown in Sherman Plaza, so I walk the streets downtown a lot, and I don't go that direction after dark because it does not feel safe to walk there. My concern with an office space there, office spaces close down at 5 p.m. or whatever, and it becomes a dead quiet space. And I'm wondering, what can you bring to the first floor retail that would continue the business? Maybe in, they talked about those people that really have missed the Burger King there with maybe a fast casual restaurant or something that would stay open later hours, but also have a price that mimics somewhat what Burger King brought to a lot of residents who depended on that price point.
Yeah.
But something that would keep it more lively and draw a more residential pedestrian traffic and not make it just dark.
Yeah, no, I think that's great feedback. I'll tell you, if it wasn't this site, I'll tell you retail's tough, but just because this site is so unique and this is a site that comes along every 50 years, that when we had the right to secure the control of this site, we jumped all over it. I would tell you retail is very, very difficult in this environment unless you have a retail site that works. And that's why we're excited about this, because very rarely do you have a mixed use site that it works for all the uses that you're planning, and you build it because the community wants it. This one, actually, I feel that hard corner works for retail and it works for office and it works together. And I 100% agree that in a food and beverage, it works for the community, it works for us, and those scientists working upstairs can come down and be a normal steward of the community and grab a beer after work and walk home and feel safe. I will tell you, we'll have 24-hour coverage of security in the lobby. It'll be lit. All the amenities spaces are adjacent to the street, which will be lit. It's not like the lights shut off just because floors 2 through 10 are unencumbered or not being utilized during those hours. It'll feel like it's active. Building systems are on 24/7, airs in and out 24/7, securities 24/7. So I think we're all aligned there.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. I echo all those concerns that Deborah mentioned. I think it would be wonderful to have those inviting, welcoming, accessible sort of venues on the ground level. And one of the large reasons that retail is difficult in Evanston is because rent is so high. So just to maybe we can sort of massage the idea of making that possible for a small business and a one-off business, something that has Evanston flavor to it, something that's not a formula business down there to attract people. That would be great. Carol Bass.
Hi. Thank you for meeting with us. This is great. A couple of things that people have already covered. I'd like to just kind of emphasize that I think there's, concern by many people. The western facade is really important. That's the side of the building that people are going to see when they're coming into Evanston down Elgin Road. It's also the side of the building that many, many of us who live in tall buildings downtown are going to see every day, maybe out our windows. It's the western facade needs to be interesting. And I'm pleased with what I see. I think that it probably will be. Also very concerned that you're not sell to Northwestern in the future. I understand the things that you said, but that's with Evanstonians, that's a big deal. There are 3 other things. When I look at the floor plans, maybe I'm not reading it right, but when I look at the loading dock access, it looks to me like the freight elevator is not as big as the passenger elevators, and that the freight elevator does not have direct access to the loading dock. That freight would have to be taken out a hallway back into another. Right, so you've got the loading dock with the 2 trucks on the bottom and the center. And then it's not labeled, but there's over on the left.
This is the freight right here.
Elevator, right?
Yep, so you go through, this is a back of house right into the loading, so it is connected.
Well, it's not very well connected. Why can't you just go straight across? You're going out into a hallway and back.
No one will go back here without a secure fob. So this is only building service that goes through the blue. This is more of just an area to show you that no one will walk back here. This is all a janitorial staff that will bring garbage down in the evening.
That's less my concern. I think if there's not a reason not to have direct access, why would you not have direct access? Elevators are important. Freight elevators are really important. The freight elevator should be good size, and you should be able to take your stuff off the back of the truck and go straight into the elevator if it's possible. So
we agree that placement will probably be massaged a little bit. I think the concern is, just in general, loading docks are semi-tempered and elevator lobbies take air up the building. So we do need to have separation between the elevator and outside air. But outside of that, we'll massage that. It's a good point. I think getting better access to the loading to the elevator. It's a big elevator, but we agree, bigger is better. We can get it.
Bigger the better. You're going to have equipment going in and out of this building. Freight elevators are important. Also, street drop off at the front door on the street. And maybe this is more of a city thing than a builder thing, but we've got some buildings in Evanston where the drop off by the front door infringes on traffic or almost infringes on traffic to the point that it's not real safe. So I would like you to make sure that there are a couple of spaces where people can drop off and pick people up in the front door. And then the other thing, it looks as though you're going to have a terrace on the top floor. You're going to have an exercise room on the top floor and then a nice big beautiful terrace there. Is that right?
Yes. Here, I'll pull this up so you can talk to the plan and that so everyone can see here. There we go. So this is indoor space. Anywhere in gray is outdoor, and then green's just a placeholder for some landscaping. Obviously, it's not going to be hardscape everywhere.
This terrace is going to be, to the best of my knowledge, absolutely unique in downtown Evanston. It seems as though to me that you're saying that you want this to become a community space. It seems as though to me that if you would allow this to be rented out as an event space, that you would, that it would get a lot of buy-in to your building. It certainly would help have a lot of activity there. It would be evenings and weekends when the building, won't be as busy. You're saying that there will be some people there, but we all know that there won't be a lot of people there. If this could be an event space for wedding receptions, for meetings, for whatever kind of gathering, I think it would be a real service to the people who live in Evanston, because there are a lot of people, probably most people, who live in Evanston who don't really have anywhere that they can go to be up high and have one of the gorgeous lake views that this community just has. Is there a possibility that you could have put in, an adequate catering kitchen and allow this beautiful terrace, which is going to be overlooking the lake, 10th floor overlooking the lake, 150 feet high, or 140 feet high, to allow the community to have access to it as a rental event space?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually one that we get probably more often than not, since we build buildings that are of type 1 construction, get high vertical in cities that we build in. So I will tell you, there's areas like ground level for safety. I mean, these users are signing leases, and the leases are 150 pages, and they talk about front door security and IT and IP, and that the addresses that they can't have risk of people coming in the vertical transportation, going up, following someone on an elevator to a floor they're not going to, and being in these laboratory areas. So we've typically said, yes, we'll work with the community for one-off events to try to do that, but it gets very, very difficult to get people from the community up in the building in a secure location in a research facility, because those are the things that will cause this project to have issues leasing up and will require a different level of commitment there. So I will tell you that we've never been able to do that. Now, when we get calls and say, hey, can we host something? We review it with security. We work during business hours, but we also have to make sure the tenants that are paying to be in this building have rights to rent it out and utilize it for their meetings, et cetera. So we're never against it. We just can't say, yes, into perpetuity, we're going to host weddings up there, because that's very, very difficult. And it's actually pretty hard to pull off in a private, vertical elevator location there.
It seems as though something could be done with elevators and, require security at the elevators, so that some elevators only go during that time, only go to the top floor.
Yeah, I think what we view is the community is actually, and sorry to interrupt, I didn't know you were still talking on that. Sorry, go ahead.
such a service to the people of Evanston. It would give you buy-in for this.
Yeah, no.
I think people would love it.
We'll look at it. I want to make sure everyone knows that we view the community too. I mean, this building's going to be a community, and we view it as, just because if outside patrons can't come in and go utilize the deck, there are also going to be events, and we're going to have programming, and we're going to have people from outside community attending those, but it has to be secure, and you'll never be able to finance it if it's not secure. Lenders, equity, us, operations, property management, it's very, very tough to bring in people from outside unless it's under strict protocol in a research facility. So we'll try our best. We're trying to do that on the grade level, interacting, but I just want to make sure everyone knows it's going to be very tough to commit.
The grade level is important in that spot, but the grade level does not have it just isn't the same as a rooftop terrace.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Like if there were such a thing as just an entirely separate elevator for something like that.
Right.
That would be really exciting and wonderful because that location is amazing. Let's see, there was a question, I got texted a question, someone was not able to get their message on here. I have a question. Who are your renters in your Chicago building? Who do you lease to?
In the Chicago building, I'm only going to talk about the ones that we are currently occupied with their name on the building, and occupying it is Xeris Pharmaceuticals, moved back from San Diego because there was no lab space in Chicagoland when they were looking for lab, but we delivered our building and they've moved in and are doing science. Talos Biomedical is a diagnostics company that has lab and innovation in Menlo Park, California, and they're in our building. Doing research, R&D in diagnostics, a number of different areas of concentration. We also have a Launchpad venture capital firm that's supplying wet and dry lab to startup companies that has 10 companies within their floor, and that's Portal Innovations. And there are a number of companies doing work within that. And we have various others that'll be in and operational in the first quarter that I cannot announce, but we obviously feel strong. That project is obviously hundreds of millions of dollars. We're delivering another project down the street for a few $100 million, and it's all life science, it's all research. And we're talking to you about a project that's more research, and that we just think there's plenty of demand for it.
Councilmember Kelly, there's a question from Emily Guthrie. Did you get that one? So her question was, I think it's, what does zoning require for 150,000 square feet of office space, and what is the number of parking spaces that are required for zoning? So I will toss that over to Melissa Klotz.
Thanks, Johanna. Office is considered a compliant use in the downtown when it is above the ground floor. The ground floor does have to have an active use, which is why there is the retail space there. And the overall parking requirement for the building as shown currently is 199 spaces.
So obviously that's, and we've been working with staff on a plan, but I think they would admit that the current office zoning for a site like this in a downtown, that code doesn't really match with other communities across the country for parking. I think it's an old code that probably needs updating. So furthermore, it's exacerbated by the research innovation, less dense lab. And then we were trying to work with the city to come up with a plan to satisfy the additional. I think we're looking for plus minus 100-ish stalls in addition to the 35 that are on site that will come up with an agreement. We do think that's more than enough. For instance, we have a building that's 3 or 2 times the size downtown, and that building has 110 parking stalls for double the size building. So, and it's not as walkable and not as transit friendly in the location in the Fulton Market District.
And Johnny, how many floors of building would have to accommodate 199 parking spaces?
Sorry, say that again. So how many?
If you had to build all that parking on site at this location, just humor me, how many floors would that add to the building?
Gosh, probably double.
At least you're talking
4 floors.
You're 35
Yeah.
And that's the plate maxed out. So that's 6 floors of parking. You're talking no connection to the at grade pedestrian experience with that much height in parking, I would say.
It'd just be a big podium.
Can you give us a range of, I know you don't know because you're gonna sort of cater to the needs of those moving in, but a range of office, like the number of spaces, like 50 to 200 or just.
Yeah, I think we're gonna, Melissa, I think the last time we spoke, we're trying to, we don't feel like we need the extra, but if that's what takes to get everyone comfortable that we need to do so, we're looking at a plan to I think secure, Melissa, was it a total of 100 or 100 within the 35? I can't remember off the top of my head because it was more than we thought we needed.
We had talked about leasing 100 in addition to the 35 that you have on site. And another option that you can always do is you can lease the amount that you think you don't need. And then once you have all of your tenants and truly know how much parking they need, you can come back to the city and ask for that to be reduced.
Yeah, with proof and show that we're not utilizing it. So, because what we need is if we're required to do so, we need to point to it when we lease it. And then if no one's using it, we obviously don't want to encumber it on your behalf. If no one's using it, we'd rather let someone else use it in the community.
Yeah, I thought it'd be an interesting stat also, just quickly to, Johnny's mentioned it a couple of times in terms of density of a typical office user versus a life science laboratory user. We generally see a typical office user anywhere from 150 to 200 square foot per employee. Due to the commitment that an employee needs to both lab space and office space, they're what's called a transient occupant. So you need essentially double the amount of space to house the same amount of employees. We see laboratory space in the 400 to 600 square foot per person range. So you're talking an office that's at least half as dense as a typical, call it a technology office user versus a laboratory office user.
So in what ballpark, how many spaces are we talking about? What's the range of office space, the number of office spaces?
It's really square footage, so it's not the range. So you're saying it's 150,000 feet. And if you would use the 600, like Matt just said, that'd be 250 employees kind of within that building.
So potentially 250 spaces, office spaces?
It'd be 250 employees, not office spaces, employees within the box of office. Because right now there's not compartmentalized, there's different floors. That's just 250 to 300 workers within that. And if you think about everyone, a third of those walk, a third of those bike, a third of those drive, a third of them Uber. I mean, they're not a third, but 4/5, whatever you want to say it. They don't all come in a car.
Right. I'm not asking about parking right now. I'm just curious about, like, when we're saying we're, putting up an office building that's going to have approximately this many office spaces. I'm not asking about parking.
Okay. Well, I guess my only thing is, I guess office spaces, they could be a half floor, full floor, a fourth of a floor. So we usually typically just say square footage of the building and slice it up where we think it'll lease up. I bet there'll be 10 companies plus minus within the building. If we just want to say on average of where we think it'll 8 to 10 that will lease up.
And these companies do have a wide range of scales. And we've seen that already with the tenants that Johnny's described. We've had users as small as 6,000 square feet up to well over 30,000 square feet. And we expect larger users potentially from that as these groups scale from seed money, venture, small company startups to larger scale production, getting their kind of certifications and approvals. So it happens fast too, faster than a typical office tenant would. They're looking to change and adapt at speed we're already seeing in a short amount of time. That is not traditional. So it's part of the flexibility of the design of the building as well, is that you have to work with the same tenants or work with tenants who need to move to a different or bigger or better space or contract in the future for changing science. So that's a big part of why these buildings are different than your typical office product you see.
Right. Okay. Tricia Connolly.
Thank you. I have been doing some reading and I'm curious about the demographic that this is being focused on. It appears to me with these life science buildings, the focus is really on a younger demographic, like you were mentioning, graduate students, as well as like people in their early 30s. And I've read information that says, well, they're trying to put these buildings in hip areas, like I think yours is in Fulton Market, right? Because people want to be around all the buzz and the hip, access to things. And in addition, like set up near Lincoln Yards in the 78 in Chicago. So I do wonder in the town of Evanston, having lived in Chicago many years myself, I don't really consider Evanston really along those lines, and especially after COVID, even less so. So
yeah, I guess it's a great question. I want to steer away from demographics. This is not a demographic discussion. This is who's leasing, and those come at all different colors, ages, types, whatever we want to call it. This is a cohort of the office sector that we're going after, and it's not driven by millennials. I would tell you that there's ages, to get up to a chief science officer and a head of a lab is not someone right out of the university, I'll just say. So it doesn't go after one specific demographic. So it's not obviously an apartment building or different, that you have to design the facilities around a specific age. It's really the user driven. And then furthermore, there's always going to be university ties to companies. And when people graduate, they have a badge of honor where they graduated from, and they want to give back. And there's philanthropic giving back. There's people that want to keep companies local. There's just a lot of things. There's labor, there's, training the workforce that are students, but they were a student once before. Those are what we're going after. And I think that there are the Fulton Markets, there are all the downtowns, but there also is the universities where all this science is coming out of. And there's always going to be a world-class university in your town. And that's always going to have a need for science given the offering that they have. So there's room for everyone. I think they're all going to succeed if you build the right product in the right location. I think we're going to build the right product. I think this is the location if you do it in Evanston.
Thank you, Tricia. Yeah, I think obviously we have a research park, and I'm sure, have you all sort of examined that area?
Yes, we have.
So I think there's concern, obviously. I think you're right that this is a place for that, but it's, how will this enhance Evanston and meet the interests and the needs of the residents? I know it'll meet the interests and needs of the developer. Like, yes, it's right next to Northwestern. So for sure, there's an interest in terms of, bang for your buck. But in terms of the town and the community, I think that's where maybe Tricia Connolly's question is coming from. Let's see, another question here. Did you consider any other, this is from Ms. Jetzer, did you consider any other sites to build on, or was this the only site that you considered?
This is the only site that we think works for right now of what we looked at. We've always had our eye on the ball of in and around Evanston, given our proximity to Amador, Evanston, and we were up there for quite some time entitling it and getting it built and leasing it up. So in our minds, it has to be a big enough site. It has to have enough density. You can't just build a 3-story building and create an ecosystem. You have to build a large enough facility to attract the big, small, and the medium. And you can't do that on a site that doesn't really allow for the uniqueness, the scale, and the kind of the entry point, and to really to attract talent from all over the world. So this is, in our minds, a site that checks all those boxes.
So I think, let's see, other questions? I just want to emphasize again that ground floor. I agree with Ms. Bass that if there was a way, that is really the location that most Evanstonians don't have access to, is that the beautiful view of the lake from a rooftop terrace. So if there's any way to make that a space that can be accessed, during certain days or hours, that would be, maybe not all the time, but again, at least maybe on weekends or some way, that would be a really nice benefit. And that ground floor, I think one of the problems that we have with some of the retails too is Evanston sort of losing its identity with large, I'm not saying I don't like the structure, but we are taking out that other brick building just to the south of it. So, we're getting a larger scale mono, structure there. And so the problem is with the retail is when they lose sort of their identity on the ground floor, when they get swallowed up in large buildings, sometimes they become less attractive and don't have the same draws. So anything we can do on that ground floor to highlight identity and maybe uniqueness and difference to make retail interesting down there and not just sort of, have that feel of homogeny on the bottom where everything's just sort of, I think.
That's great feedback. And out of curiosity, the rooftop, I mean, what's once you're over a certain level, I'm just bringing this up and you could say that's not what I'm hearing, but if there is a way to get certain things that we can't do as our current plan contemplates, obviously height, density allows us to do things more unique. Is there any flexibility if there was an extra floor or two that we could try to do some of these things? Obviously, we need the 150,000 square feet of office. So if you try to get people vertical or you try to pull things back or push and pull, I mean, I'm just bringing it up for discussion is what's the sticking point? I hear parking, which we're going to satisfy with adjacent and prove up our studies that we think are adequate. That's key. We're going to focus on the west side of the building, which is key. I'm just curious, some of these other things that are being asked, it's not all going to fit in the kind of the balloon, right? So we're trying to think creatively and what's really driving the concerns of the community that stay away from it. I just haven't heard heights here, given the neighbors that are adjacent to this structure and given the location of the site.
So I'll let other people speak, but I'm Cecile McHugh.
Yes, I wasn't speaking along those lines, but I had two questions. And I apologize, I came late to the meeting. I was in another meeting. So if they were answered already, just let me know and I'll watch the recording later on. But my question is regarding taxes. So did you answer questions about the taxes earlier?
Yeah, this is a speculative development where we're going to have multi-tenants in the building. So it will be on the tax roll, and we're not asking for any TIF or anything like that.
No, but what I'm asking about is if there were not-for-profit organizations renting your labs, would you still be paying property taxes for the lab that are not-for-profit rented?
I believe so, and there's a lot smarter people that answer why. Behind me, probably even people on the screen in front of us or a consultant, but I believe it's really about the ownership, and if it's not 100% nonprofit facility, the whole building pays and everyone pays their pro rata share of that. I believe Johanna or others that want to chime in, but we can follow up with exact data on that.
Could that be answered?
It really comes down to how the assessor views the users. It's all about the users. It's not about the owners. So a not-for-profit could own the building, but could have four users in the space that are for-profit users. It really comes down to that the building owner has certain obligations to fulfill in terms of reporting information to the assessor gathers information, the city provides information on the property. So it's not as easy as saying it will pay taxes, it won't pay taxes. I think everybody's goal here is for this building to produce taxes, not just for property taxes, but also users in our downtown that will go generate sales tax and energy and excitement in our downtown. Okay. So that is definitely a big opportunity here to generate new revenue for the city.
All right. So it is the case then that if these labs were rented to, of course, not going to be 100% not-for-profit organizations, but let's make it simplistic. If the labs were rented to 100% not-for-profit organizations, there is a chance, and a very good chance, that no property tax would be paid. Is that correct?
I guess I would kick this back to Johnny. I'm not sure there's many not-for-profit labs.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any non-for-profits that are leasing big lab spaces in a multi-tenant building, but I think there's always a what if scenario, and I don't think that's our plan. And I think we've answered a few of these tax questions here thus far. So I think we can jump to the next on that one.
Yeah, I just want to say
I have a follow-up though, if you don't mind.
Oh, of course.
Because, and I'm asking questions out of ignorance, but that's how you learn.
No, it's totally fine. That's what we're here for.
And so Northwestern professors say renting lab space are, I would guess, likely to be not for profit, right? And
The
right across
lab,
the
they're not
street.
we're not here to lease spaces to individual scientists. There might be a floor within the building that's more of a launch pad operator that leases to those individuals. These are going to be people that are creating companies. It might be 3 to 5 people, companies that grow to 30 people in a year once their science or AI or other takes off and they get around to funding and they grow within the building. So I will tell you that that's not.
I understand that that's what you're saying, that you're planning, and, but, life doesn't always turn out the way you plan. And so if you say rented to the microbiology department, that would be a not-for-profit, and maybe all of that percentage of the building would then, you would not pay property taxes on, probably, seems to me.
I believe it's more driven on if all the users are non-for-profit or if it's a mix. If it's a mix, I believe it falls into the bucket of those users are looking at space. They're not going to go to a building that pays taxes, that them pay taxes, because they're in a building that pays taxes, versus go somewhere else and be in their own building where they don't pay taxes. That's where I think we may be talking around one another. I think we're saying the same thing. This is, in our minds, this is going to be on the tax roll, this building.
So
yes, but you are right across the street from Northwestern. And so it seems to me that if Northwestern needed space, they don't have a building to put their research operations. They would go across the street to your building and they might rent space. And then therefore we may not see that some significant percentage of your building is generating taxes.
Yeah, I think they're also, and I'm not speaking for the university, but obviously we read the paper and the announcement. They have their own plans, I believe, for some facilities in and around Evanston that I won't speak to, but I believe those are some of the buildings that you'll see that occur more than a building like ours. I think ours is going to be just like we are doing downtown, where the science is coming out of those buildings and these people are starting companies and they're becoming mature companies and they're leasing spaces directly in a for-profit manner.
Okay, and my second question, and I can come back. You want to come back to me, or shall I go ahead with my second question?
Go ahead.
I hear in a number of developments in the area, let's say the Emerson is planning on leasing spaces. So who is controlling, and this is a city question, who's controlling, like who's leasing what, and would the leasing agreement be for a year and maybe not be renewed? And will there be competition between the different, I mean, we only have so many spaces and we have a number of different developments say they're leasing spaces. How do we know that there's enough spaces to lease for all the different developments? That's a city question.
So one of the things that once this application is submitted, staff will review it. And the way it works is it gets routed to staff from different departments: fire, parking, planning and zoning reviews this, building inspection, public works. All across the city, there are staff that reviews the document. We provide comments. It's a pretty extensive comment letter that goes back to the developer. The developer makes some updates to the plan and proposal, and then this comes to design and project review committee. So that's a public staff meeting. I'm sure developers will tell you that's semi-unusual, that staff convenes a public staff meeting to review the proposed development. So we review it. We do have somebody that sits on that committee who is the city's parking manager. So he oversees all the parking spaces, all of the parking garages. And if he was on this call, he could probably tell you right now how many parking spaces are available at each of the garages and their daily usage and lots of information along those lines. He also has a pretty good handle on the private parking garages as well. Who is leasing spaces? Because some of the residential properties have been overbuilt in parking and they've come back to the council and asked to lease the parking within that to neighborhood users. So they've been able to relieve some of the parking congestion in neighborhoods by leasing spaces within those buildings. So we will review that really extensively in terms of available parking. We would never lease parking that we don't have to lease. We would never, we're not like the airlines, we're not going to overbook the parking spaces. Something else to think about is our office environment has changed. The way people use spaces has changed. The way people aren't necessarily coming into downtown every day of the week. There might be 2 or 3 days on and 2 or 3 days off, or however that works. So you're not necessarily going to see people coming in every day, maybe even slightly different hours. So those are all things that we're trying to understand a bit more and stay on top of and understand how that might change change in our environment. That might even change our ability and the opportunity to lease more parking spaces.
Okay, so you understand my question, just as simple. No, let's make it simple. The Link has a certain number of parking places. Emerson's gonna, try to rent some of those, and who's keeping track of that they're not double booked? The city parking manager is obviously responsible for city parking garages, as you say, and you said the city parking manager has a good feel for what happens with the private spaces too. So would it be the city parking manager who would check this out and say, oh yeah, no, those spaces at the Link have not been promised to multiple people?
That's city staff. We review that. They don't get
City
approved
staff
if they
does
don't
that.
have. Yeah, so it's not just one person. It's the development's approved and reviewed, and that information is conveyed to city council. City council reviews it in terms of what's available and what's not.
Okay.
They have to produce documents that indicate they've leased those spaces. So,
And you keep
there's
track
a
of
lot
how
checks.
many in the Link are promised to the Emerson, how many in the Link might be promised to this building, and you're keeping track of that.
Right, correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Cecile.
See, Mary's got something, unless Councilmember Kelly, you had someone else on your list. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. I had a couple questions that pertain to the actual construction and environmental. As Evanston is trying to go towards being a green city, does this building have any particular features such as geothermal or something that utility wise is really good? And is it concrete?
Yeah, this will be a concrete and or steel building. And we do, every building we build has unique standards that we follow, and we try to be stewards of the environment when we not only from the materials we select, but how we operate them. So for instance, this most likely or will be a LEED certified building, and office standards to secure the tenants, you typically need that. So this will be forward thinking materials and operation down to waste management and recycling programs within the building.
Just given the nature of the program inside the laboratories, they are almost always high efficiency, very kind of high state-of-the-art design for the mechanical equipment, exhaust air systems. Everything kind of has to be given the kind of quantity of air we're moving around. So naturally, they're usually pretty high efficiency system.
Okay, and on the outside, what you were talking about, different woods and stuff, it's just, as I'm following like the carbon footprint of concrete buildings is so high. And so I'm wondering what could be done to mitigate that.
Yeah, no, it's great. We always look for recyclable materials, not only on the outside, but the flooring, the tile, the woods, the composites, all that is baked in our model. And we try to, as a company, we look at that very seriously.
Okay, and my last question is, Ms. McHugh, I think is right on with that, or whoever asked about the taxes. And you can tell from all the questions, we are so concerned about Northwestern. We have about 40%, I don't know, just 242 acres plus off the tax records here that belong to Northwestern already. But one thing that could be, are your tenants, do they pay the taxes in your?
Yeah,
lease?
we pass those through to the tenants. So all of our leases will be on a net basis, meaning we get the tax bill, we divide it up proportionally, and we send the tenants their bill, and they reimburse us as owner. We don't pay those as landlord unless it's vacant. We pay on the vacant space. So the end user, and that's where Johanna, I think, referenced, it's really driven by the users, not the owner. The owner is a passive stream that really governs the tax body. And I think if you look at case study and others, that it's really, if this is a multi-tenant building where we're passing those through, I don't think there's a position where one user is going to not pay taxes and the other users are going to pay a bigger amount or less. I think it's kind of all or nothing in the way we look at it, but I think that's how we understand it, Mary.
I would, yeah, because I'm thinking just in the sense of, I know Northwestern has worked out sometimes an agreement with the city. I know a property on Orrington and Central where they're paying the taxes, even though it's nonprofit, in lieu of, because so I'm just suggesting that if it comes to fruition, that we work out something with it. So if Northwestern or the nonprofits come through, it's like, no, you're going to do something in lieu of the nonprofit status.
Right, and I would have to agree, and I think it is proportional that, you know, taxes are paid. If you had one office building that was a nonprofit and there were 10 offices in it, you would pay 1/10 less of the taxes. But I would ask that staff, if we can really get creative and look outside the box and set like what Mary's, not wait until all of a sudden we get hit like what happened to, is it 1800 Sherman that got taken off our tax rolls, and we took a hard financial hit. I'd like us to really look at now what we could do going forward, such as, I mean, you know, I think just to really get creative here and see what we can do so that we really can preclude, because this is something that Northwestern will obviously have a lot of interest in. You're putting it right next to a university for a reason. I think we need to offer residents assurance that this is not going, even though I know your intentions are not that at all. I trust you on this. I'm not challenging that, but it will be sold, and it'll, you know, we can't guarantee it. So and this isn't for you, but I think us as a city, we can look at what other cities have done and see if there is in some way that we can protect that.
Thank you.
Does that seem, Johanna, like something that
oh yes, definitely. We can absolutely look at that. And I think we have some ideas within staff already of how we can think about. I think that this is all good feedback for us to work from, and it's also good for the developer and the development team to hear that this is really important. We're hearing less about materials and height and glazing on the windows and more about the taxes. So I think that's a good message.
It's a first, but we're all about it. So we'll work with you to figure something out. That shouldn't be an issue. And I think, I don't want to go back unless Councilmember Kelly's got more she wants to hit on, but I'm curious on that question. We answered a few others that were kind of follow-up, but I don't know if we really covered the density of height. If there's flexibility for certain things that we can say yes to and try to address in exchange for the things I mentioned about potentially a floor or two to help try to achieve some of the things you guys want.
So I can tell you right now, I've already heard a lot of concern about height. So.
Okay, so steer away from the height increase. Okay.
I mean, I've heard that, but others here can, you know, chime in.
I'll say the reason I think a lot of us are not doing it because you didn't go to 11 to 15.
Crazy.
You know, it's sort of like it's higher than you'd like, but if there's other great benefits, and like that other person said, a drop off so that Orrington and Clark don't get locked up with people who are stopping just to unload stuff on the streets. If there's thought process going in and space on the outside, I think we just want a livable downtown.
That's great. That's very reasonable. And I think that's exactly what we wanted to talk about tonight.
I think the other concern besides the taxes is that idea of it going dead at 5 o'clock, right? That this is an office building. And that's why that uniqueness, that sense of identity and character on the ground floor, that's really got some jazzy going on so that it's alive, and or, you know, that, and maybe additionally, potentially a separate elevator or something where we could have, you know, like I said, maybe weekend events or some little cafe or something going on, rooftop, things like that. That is going to mean that you enter Evanston at 6 o'clock and it's just this big, dark, you know, mass.
Yep. No, that's good. And I think Matt are already shaking their heads. They have a few ideas. So I hope they do, at least.
Any other questions? And could I'd like to just, you know, I'll send out a letter if I could commit to by Monday, any concerns or questions or anything else that comes in, if I get those to you all. Johnny, would that be all right?
That'd be great. And we'll try our best to satisfy the ones we can control and keep you up to speed. And if you want to post things to your website or your email, we'll help you do so.
I'm sorry, there's one more question here. Does Trammell Crow intend to put the building up for sale once leasing reaches a certain percentage?
We build every building as if we're owning it forever. Every building depends on the lease up, the absorption, the time of the market. So we don't think about them differently. That's all I can say on that topic. We've done buildings where we sell them if the timing's right, and then a big institution owns them forever. It's no different than us. Sometimes our partners own it forever and we move on. Sometimes we own it forever. So there's a little bit of everything. And I think that's pretty down the middle of a response you'll hear from from any owner, we can't have handcuffs on telling us when we can sell or not sell.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And again, I'd ask everybody here, if you think of something during the week between now and Sunday, email me at ckelly@cityofelvanston.org, and I'll compile any additional questions or comments and send them to Trammell Crow and to Johanna and staff. So thank you again, everybody, for being here this evening. Thank you, Johanna and staff, and Melissa and Katie. Really appreciate your support. And we'll all be in touch.
All right. Take care, everybody. Enjoy your night.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for the
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye,